I was driving back to the office after a long day filled with meetings and strategic decisions when the unexpected happened. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Boston's financial district as I navigated through the familiar streets. Being the CEO of Horizon Investments had its perks: the corner office with a view of the Charles River, the respect that followed my name in boardrooms, and yes, the sleek black Mercedes that purred beneath me as I drove. My mind was still churning with figures from our quarterly report when I pulled into the reserved parking space outside our headquarters. That's when I noticed something unusual. A little girl, no older than 5, sat confidently in the driver's seat of my car, her small hands gripping the wheel as if she belonged there. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. How could a child be in my locked car? The surreal image sent a shiver down my spine, and I could hardly believe what I was seeing. "What the hell?" I muttered, checking my surroundings to see if I was being pranked. The security guard, Mike, was at his usual post near the entrance, completely unaware of the situation unfolding in the parking lot. No cameras, no laughing colleagues, nothing to explain this bizarre scenario. My heart raced as I stepped out of the car, the polished exterior reflecting my bewildered expression. I couldn't fathom how such an impossibility could occur, a high-profile billionaire CEO like myself encountering a tiny, innocent figure in such a setting. The streets were silent, and time seemed to slow down as I tried to comprehend the reality before me. The little girl didn't seem frightened or out of place. In fact, she looked completely at ease, her legs swinging back and forth, barely reaching the pedals. She wore a simple blue dress with tiny white flowers, her blonde hair pulled into 2 neat pigtails secured with matching blue ribbons. There was something hauntingly familiar about her features that I couldn't quite place. "Hello," she said simply, her voice clear and confident as her bright blue eyes met mine. "I've been waiting for you." The statement, delivered with such certainty from someone so young, almost knocked the wind out of me. I glanced around again, expecting to see a frantic parent searching for their child, but the parking lot remained eerily empty. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "How did you get in my car?" She tilted her head to one side, studying me with a penetrating gaze that seemed far too wise for her years. "I'm Emma," she replied, as if that explained everything. And the door was open. I knew that was impossible. My car had a state-of-the-art security system. I never left the doors unlocked. Yet here she was, this mysterious child named Emma, sitting in the driver's seat of my Mercedes as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Standing in disbelief, I approached the car slowly, my mind whirring with questions and doubts. Emma's bright smile and sparkling eyes radiated an unexpected warmth that conflicted with the incongruity of her presence in my vehicle. In that moment, I felt both a sense of responsibility and a deep, inexplicable connection stirring within me. "Emma," I said, trying to sound calm and reassuring despite the chaos in my head, "where are your parents? Are you lost?" She shook her head, those pigtails bouncing slightly. "I'm not lost. I found you." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Found me? What did that mean?" I loosened my tie, suddenly feeling constricted despite the cool October air. "Listen, sweetheart," I said, adopting the tone I used when speaking to my business partner Tom's kids at company picnics. "I need to help you find your mom or dad. They must be very worried about you." Emma slid over to the passenger seat, leaving the driver's side free. "You can drive," she said, buckling her seatbelt. "I'll show you where to go." Part of me knew I should call security, or the police, or child services. Any responsible adult would. But something about this child, about Emma, made me hesitate. There was an authority in her manner that defied her years, and against all logic, I found myself getting into the driver's seat. "Emma," I tried again, "I really need to know how you got here and who your parents are." She looked at me with those piercing blue eyes, and for a split second, I saw something else in them, something old and knowing. "You'll understand soon," she said. "But first, we need to go." "Go where?" I asked, my hand hovering over the ignition. "Home," she replied simply. I should have called the police. I should have taken her to the security desk. I should have done a dozen different things other than what I did next. But something in her voice, in those familiar eyes, compelled me. I started the car. As we pulled out of the parking lot, my phone buzzed with messages from my assistant Sarah about the upcoming board meeting, but for the first time in 15 years, I ignored work completely. The child beside me had somehow become the center of my universe, a gravitational force pulling me toward an unknown destination. "Turn left here," Emma directed as we approached Beacon Street. Her confidence was unnerving. How did a 5-year-old know the streets of Boston so well? As I followed her directions, leaving the gleaming skyscrapers of the financial district behind, I found myself entering neighborhoods I hadn't visited in years. The pristine storefronts gave way to more modest shopping areas, and eventually to residential streets lined with brownstones and maple trees beginning to turn gold and crimson with the approach of autumn. "Emma," I said after we'd been driving for nearly 20 minutes, "can you tell me anything about your mother? Or your father? Anyone who might be looking for you?" She turned to me, her expression serious. "My mother is waiting," she said. "She's been waiting a long time." The cryptic answer did nothing to ease my growing anxiety, but I continued to follow her directions, turning onto streets that grew increasingly familiar in ways I couldn't explain. It was as if I was driving through the pages of a half-forgotten book, with landmarks that triggered distant memories. The strange thing was, despite the absurdity of the situation, me, Richard Westfield, CEO of Horizon Investments, essentially kidnapping a child, I didn't feel afraid or even particularly concerned. Instead, I felt like I was on the precipice of something important, something that would change everything. As the car glided through the streets of Boston, guided by the small voice beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was heading exactly where I needed to go. We drove through Brookline, a neighborhood I hadn't visited in over 20 years. The streets grew narrower, and the houses more familiar. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as Emma directed me to turn onto a quiet, tree-lined avenue. Something about the way the sunlight filtered through the maple leaves stirred a memory so distant I could barely grasp it. "Stop here," Emma said suddenly, pointing to a small park nestled between rows of brick townhouses. I pulled over, cutting the engine but making no move to get out. The park was simple, a few benches, some playground equipment, and a small duck pond. Nothing remarkable, yet my heart was pounding as if I'd run a marathon. "Do you know this place?" Emma asked, her voice soft but insistent. The words caught in my throat as memories started to surface. "I used to come here as a kid." Emma nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "With Beth." The name hit me like a physical blow. Beth. My sister. How did this child know about Beth? As I knelt down beside the car, ready to gently ask, "Who is your mother?" my thoughts were abruptly interrupted by the eerie familiarity in her face. In the midst of my shock, every detail, the way her eyes glistened under the afternoon sun, the gentle curve of her smile, struck a chord deep within me. I found myself frozen, overwhelmed by an emotion I could neither label nor fully understand. "How do you know that name?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the distant sounds of children playing in the park. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the car door. "Come," she said, slipping out and waiting expectantly on the sidewalk. Against my better judgment, a phrase that seemed to be defining this entire afternoon, I followed her. My legs felt leaden as I walked beside her toward a bench overlooking the pond. This specific bench, the one where Beth and I used to sit while feeding the ducks with bread crusts our mother had saved for us. "Beth was your sister," Emma said as we sat down. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I replied, my throat tight. "She was. She died when I was 12. The words hung in the air between us. I hadn't spoken about Beth in years, had barely allowed myself to think about her. The pain of losing her had been too much for our family to bear. My parents divorced shortly after her death, and I was shuttled between two broken homes until I left for college, determined to build a life where I was in control, where loss couldn't touch me. She had blue eyes, Emma said, looking directly at me. Like mine. The resemblance that had been nagging at me suddenly became clear. This child, this stranger who had appeared in my car, had my sister's eyes. The same shape, the same startling shade of blue that had always reminded me of summer skies. Memories began to flood my mind like a torrential storm. I recalled long-forgotten fragments of my childhood, Beth teaching me to ride a bike in this very park, her patient encouragement as I wobbled down the path, the two of us lying on our backs on this bench, counting stars on summer nights. Beth's laughter as we raced around the pond, trying to catch the fastest duck. It was as if I was witnessing the past colliding with the present, a scene that defied the rationality of my corporate life. In that instant, the world around me transformed into a portal, linking me to a history I had long buried beneath success and ambition. "Who are you?" I asked again, my voice breaking. "How do you know these things?" Emma reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small, worn photograph. She handed it to me without a word. My hands trembled as I took it. The photo showed Beth at about 16, sitting on this very bench. Her arm was around a boy me, but there was something else. A slight roundness to her middle that I had never noticed before, or perhaps had chosen to forget. She was going to have a baby, Emma said quietly. But then the accident happened. The words struck me like lightning. Beth, pregnant? It couldn't be true. She was just a kid herself. But as I stared at the photo, details began to align in my mind. Beth's sudden withdrawal from the swim team, the hushed arguments between her and our parents that I had been too young to understand, the boy who used to wait for her after school but disappeared from our lives before the accident. "That's not possible," I said, but even as the words left my lips, I knew they were false. The timing fit. Beth died in a car accident 3 months before her 17th birthday. If she had been pregnant. "My mother's name is Lily," Emma said, bringing me back to the present. "She was born 2 months after the accident. Your parents didn't want her. They gave her away." I struggled to find my voice as I stared at her, trying to piece together the mystery of her identity. The absurdity of the situation was matched only by the intensity of the emotion surging through me. There was a strange, magnetic pull that connected us, a thread woven through time that demanded to be recognized and explored. "Are you saying?" I couldn't finish the sentence. It was too impossible, too overwhelming. "Lily is your niece," Emma said simply. "Beth's daughter. And I'm her daughter. That makes you my great-uncle." The world seemed to tilt around me. A niece I never knew existed. A great-niece sitting beside me, with Beth's eyes and Beth's certainty. It explained the familiarity I had felt from the moment I saw Emma in my car, the connection that had made me follow her instructions against all reason. "Why now?" I managed to ask. "Why find me now, after all these years?" Emma's expression turned solemn, older than her years. "Mom is sick. She needs help. She never wanted to bother you. She knows you're important and busy. But I found your picture in the newspaper, and I knew we had to try." A wave of shame washed over me. All these years building my empire, becoming the man whose photo appeared in financial papers, and I had never known I had family out there. Family who needed me. "How did you get into my car?" I asked, still struggling to reconcile the practical impossibility with the emotional truth sitting beside me. Emma shrugged. "The security guard let me in when I said I was your niece. I told him it was a surprise." Of course. Mike always had a soft spot for kids. He probably thought it was a charming surprise for the boss. "Will you come meet my mom?" Emma asked, her voice small for the first time since I'd encountered her. "She doesn't know I came to find you. She'll be worried about me." I looked down at the photograph in my hands, at Beth's smiling face, and felt something crack open inside me, a chamber of my heart that had been sealed shut for decades. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "Take me to your mother. Take me to Lily." As we walked back to the car, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the park, I felt as if I was walking through a dream. But the small hand that slipped into mine felt real enough, and the blue eyes looking up at me with hope were undeniably a part of my past and, perhaps, my future. In the silence that followed, I invited Emma to climb into the passenger seat, promising to take her back to her mother. As we began our journey, the familiar hum of the engine served as a backdrop to my internal monologue, filled with recollections of days gone by. Boston's evening traffic surrounded us, but I barely noticed the other cars or the changing traffic lights. My mind was elsewhere, traveling backward through decades of carefully constructed forgetfulness. "You look sad," Emma observed, watching me with those disconcerting blue eyes, Beth's eyes. "Don't be sad. Mom says it doesn't help to be sad about things we can't change." I managed a small smile. "Your mom sounds wise." "She is," Emma nodded seriously. "She teaches 3rd grade. She says 8-year-olds keep you honest." The thought of Beth's daughter, my niece, teaching children struck me as both fitting and painful. Beth had always been good with kids. She'd been patient with me, never treating me like an annoying little brother, even when I must have been exactly that. "Tell me about Lily," I said, realizing I knew nothing about this woman who shared my blood. "What else does she like besides teaching?" Emma's face lit up. "She loves books. Our apartment is full of them. And she sings in a choir at the church on Sundays. She makes the best chocolate chip pancakes, and she lets me help add the chips. She likes old movies that are in black and white, and sometimes we build blanket forts in the living room and watch them together." Each detail painted a picture of a woman I had never met, but who already seemed familiar, perhaps because I could see traces of Beth in the life she had created for her daughter. A life that had been going on parallel to mine all these years, just a few neighborhoods away. "Does she?" I hesitated, unsure how to ask the question that was burning in my mind. "Does she know anything about Beth? About our family?" Emma shrugged. "She knows a little. She has a box with some pictures and letters. She knows her mom died before she was born and that her grandparents couldn't keep her. She tried to find them once, but they had moved away. My parents, Lily's grandparents, had indeed moved away after their divorce. My father took a job in Chicago, while my mother retreated to a small town in Vermont. They had both been trying to escape the ghost of Beth, I realized now. And in doing so, they had abandoned their granddaughter. "Turn here," Emma directed, pointing to a street I hadn't traveled in years. As we turned onto Walnut Street, recognition washed over me. This had been our neighborhood where I had grown up, where Beth and I had ridden our bikes and played street hockey with the neighbor kids. Each passing street and landmark seemed to awaken dormant memories, whispering secrets of a past I had tried to forget. There was Mrs. Donovan's house, where Beth used to babysit. There was the corner store where we'd buy penny candy with our allowance. And there, my breath caught, was our old house, now painted a different color, but still unmistakably the place where I had spent the first 12 years of my life. "Did you live around here?" Emma asked, noticing my reaction. "Yes," I said softly. "Right there, in that blue house. It used to be yellow." Emma's eyes widened. "That's where my mom was born? Where my grandmother lived?" "Beth never actually lived there when she was expecting," I said, trying to piece together a timeline I had never known existed. "She must have been staying somewhere else by then. The accident happened in March, and if Lily was born in May." "May 17th, Emma supplied. "That's her birthday. May 17th. 2 months after Beth's death on March 12th. The dates aligned with a terrible precision that made my heart ache. The conversation, though sparse, was imbued with a delicate tenderness. I asked Emma soft, simple questions about her life with Lily, and every answer she gave resonated with echoes of a time when innocence reigned supreme. The car ride became more than just a commute. It evolved into a pilgrimage, a quest for lost fragments of identity. "Did Beth like to read too?" Emma asked suddenly. "Mom says she gets it from somewhere, and it wasn't from her adoptive parents." I smiled, remembering Beth's overflowing bookshelf. She loved to read. Fantasy mostly, stories about magic and other worlds. She used to read to me every night before bed, even after I was old enough to read on my own. Said it was our special time. "Mom reads to me too," Emma said, a note of pride in her voice. "We're reading The Secret Garden right now." "Beth would have loved that," I said, surprised by how easy it suddenly was to speak about my sister after decades of avoiding even the mention of her name. She was always finding secret places, a hollow tree in the park, an abandoned shed behind the school. She said everyone needed a place that was just their own. As the cityscape blurred past the windows, my mind continued piecing together clues of a forgotten connection. The juxtaposition of my present life as a powerful CEO with the stark vulnerability of my childhood self was both haunting and enlightening. The road stretched before us like an unwritten chapter of my life, waiting to be deciphered and understood. "It's just up ahead," Emma said, pointing to a modest apartment building with a small, well-kept garden out front. "We live on the second floor." I pulled into a visitor parking space, my heart pounding with an anxiety I hadn't felt since my first major business acquisition. Meeting Lily suddenly seemed more important and more terrifying than any deal I'd ever negotiated. "Mom might be surprised," Emma warned as we got out of the car. I wasn't supposed to go out alone. "How did you find me?" I asked, realizing I still didn't understand how this child had managed to locate me, let alone get to my office in the financial district. Emma looked slightly guilty. "I saw your picture in Mom's box, an old one from when you were a kid, with Beth. Then I saw you in the newspaper when your company donated money to the children's hospital. The article said where your office was." I took the tea. I stared at her in amazement. This 5-year-old had put together clues from an old photograph, identified me in a newspaper, and navigated Boston's public transportation system to find me. Either she was the most resourceful child on the planet, or... "Did someone help you?" I asked, suspicion creeping in. Emma's gaze dropped to her shoes. "Mrs. Sullivan from next door. She's a nurse at the children's hospital. She recognized you from when you visited last month. She helped me find your building, but I told her my mom was meeting me there." The pieces fell into place, not a supernatural coincidence, but a determined child with adult assistance, motivated by what I still didn't fully understand. "Emma, why did you come looking for me today? Why not wait for your mom to reach out?" Emma's expression grew serious. "Mom needs help, but she's too proud to ask. She's been sick, and she had to miss work. The hospital bills came, and she was crying when she thought I was asleep. I heard her tell Mrs. Sullivan that she might have to move us to her cousin's place in New Hampshire if she can't make rent." A wave of protective anger washed over me. My niece, Beth's daughter, was struggling financially while I lived in a penthouse and drove a car that cost more than most people's annual salary. "You're her family," Emma continued simply. "Mom always says family helps family. Family helps family." Such a basic concept, one I had forgotten in my years of self-imposed isolation. I had built Horizon Investments on the premise that wealth could insulate me from the messy, painful realities of human connection. But here was this child, with Beth's eyes and apparently her determination too, reminding me of a truth I had long buried. As we climbed the stairs to the second floor, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. What would Lily be like? Would she resent me for never knowing about her, never being there? Would she reject my help out of the same pride Emma had mentioned? Emma led me to apartment 2B and knocked on the door. "Mom, it's me." I heard quick footsteps, and then the door flung open to reveal a woman in her late 30s, her face pale with worry. "Emma, where on earth have you?" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as they moved from her daughter to me. I saw the moment of recognition cross her face, not because she knew me, but because she saw something familiar in my features. The same thing I had seen in Emma, that echo of Beth that connected us across time and circumstance. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma, apparently done with her role as intermediary, ducked under her mother's arm and into the apartment, leaving me standing awkwardly in the hallway. "My name is Richard Westfield," I said, the formal introduction feeling absurdly inadequate. "I believe I'm your uncle." Lily stared at me, her hands still on the doorknob, her expression a mixture of disbelief and caution. I could see Beth in her, not as clearly as in Emma, but in subtle ways, the slight tilt of her head, the shape of her face. Her hair was darker than Beth's had been, pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore glasses that couldn't hide the intelligence in her eyes. "Uncle," she repeated, the word sounding foreign on her tongue. "That's not possible. My mother's brother would be." Her eyes narrowed as she studied my face. "Richard?" Hearing my name from her lips sent a jolt through me. "Yes, I didn't know about you until today. Your daughter found me." Lily's gaze darted to where Emma had disappeared inside the apartment. "Emma did what?" Her voice rose slightly, a note of maternal alarm replacing her initial shock. Maybe we should talk inside, I suggested, aware that we were still standing in the hallway of her apartment building. Lily hesitated, then nodded curtly and stepped back, allowing me to enter. The apartment was small but warm and inviting. Bookshelves lined one wall, just as Emma had described, and children's artwork decorated the refrigerator. A stack of papers, student assignments, presumably, sat on the dining table beside a half-empty cup of tea. "Emma Rose Sullivan," Lily called, her voice firm but not angry. "You come out here right now and explain yourself." Emma appeared from what I assumed was her bedroom, her expression a mix of defiance and uncertainty. "I found him for you, Mom." "I found your uncle," Lily sighed, running a hand through her hair in a gesture that was achingly familiar. Beth used to do the same thing when she was trying to find the right words. "Honey, we've talked about this. You can't just go off on your own. And you certainly can't. What did you do exactly?" She turned to me, confusion evident in her eyes. "She appeared in my car," I explained, still not entirely clear on how Emma had managed it. "She said she saw my picture in the newspaper and recognized me from a photo you had." Lily closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "Emma, go to your room for a few minutes while I talk to Mr. Westfield." "Uncle Richard," Emma corrected, but she obediently retreated to her room, closing the door behind her. Lily motioned for me to sit at the small dining table while she took the chair opposite. Up close, I could see the signs of strain on her face, the shadows under her eyes, the slight hollowness of her cheeks that spoke of recent weight loss. "I'm sorry about this," she began. "Emma is resourceful and determined, but I never would have sent her to find you." "I'm glad she did," I said quietly. "I had no idea you existed. If I had known..." "Known what?" Lily's voice had an edge to it now. "That your teenage sister had a baby? That your parents gave that baby away without a second thought? What would you have done, Richard? You were just a kid yourself." The more she talked, the more I could see Beth in her, not just in her appearance, but in her direct manner, her unwillingness to soften the truth. "I was 12 when Beth died," I acknowledged. "I didn't know she was pregnant. No one told me. But I'm not a child anymore, and if I had known I had a niece, I would have wanted to meet you." Lily's expression softened slightly. "I've known about you for years. My adoptive parents told me I was adopted when I was 10. When I turned 18, I requested my original birth certificate and found my birth mother's name, Elizabeth Westfield. It wasn't hard to piece together what happened from there." "You researched us?" I asked, surprised. Lily nodded. "I found Beth's obituary online. It mentioned her parents, Margaret and James, and her brother, Richard. I tracked down your parents about 15 years ago." My heart sank. "And? Your father refused to see me. Your mother agreed to meet once, but she made it clear she had no interest in a relationship. She said Beth's death nearly destroyed her, and she couldn't bear to be reminded of it." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, but I could hear the hurt beneath her words. Shame washed over me. While I had been building my empire, focused solely on my own advancement, my niece had been searching for her family, only to be rejected by the grandparents who should have embraced her. "I'm sorry," I said again, inadequately. "They divorced after Beth died. I think they both dealt with their grief by running from it. I did too, in my own way." Lily studied me, as if trying to decide whether to believe me. "Why are you here now, Richard? What do you want?" The directness of her question caught me off guard. The more I engaged with her, the deeper my emotions sank into uncharted waters. It wasn't just a random encounter, it felt like an emotional reckoning, a moment that forced me to confront buried sentiments and unresolved questions. "I want to know you," I said simply. "You're my niece. You're Beth's daughter. That means something to me. After all these years?" Skepticism colored her voice. "You suddenly care about family now?" "I never stopped caring," I countered, surprised by the emotion in my own voice. "I just got very good at pretending I didn't. When Beth died, it was like our whole family shattered. My parents couldn't even look at each other without falling apart. I learned that the safest thing was to lock those feelings away." In the quiet intimacy of her small kitchen, I found myself opening up in a way I never had before. I shared with her, albeit in fragmented recollections, the story of a lost past that had always haunted me. I built my business because it was something I could control, I admitted. Numbers don't die. Investments don't leave you. Success doesn't break your heart. Lily's expression softened further. But they don't warm it either, do they? The simple observation struck deep. I had everything money could buy, the penthouse apartment, the corner office, the respect of Boston's business community, but my home was empty. No one waited for me. No one's artwork decorated my refrigerator. No, I agreed quietly. They don't. Lily sighed and got up to put the kettle on. The domestic gesture seemed to give her time to think. Emma says you're rich, she said finally, her back to me as she prepared 2 mugs. I chuckled despite myself. That's one way to put it. I'm the CEO of Horizon Investments. We manage assets for high-net-worth individuals and corporations. And now you've discovered you have family in a rundown apartment building in Brookline. She turned, her expression guarded. I'm not looking for a handout, Richard. I've managed on my own this far. Every word, every pause between our exchanges was laden with the weight of years spent in isolation behind boardroom doors and corporate fortresses. I felt a surge of gratitude for Emma's unexpected visit, who had inadvertently become the mirror reflecting my deepest truths. The confrontation was not with an adversary, but with my own memories, a poignant reminder of the life I had once lived. Emma mentioned you've been sick, I said carefully, watching Lily's face for her reaction. Her shoulders tensed. That child notices everything, she muttered, setting a mug of tea in front of me before taking her seat again. I had surgery last month. Nothing serious, just gallbladder removal, but there were complications. I had to take more time off work than I expected, and my health insurance doesn't cover everything. The matter-of-fact way she described her struggle only made it more gut-wrenching. This woman was Beth's daughter, my blood, and she had been suffering financial hardship while I accumulated wealth I barely used. Let me help, I said immediately. Please, Lily. Not as a handout, but as family. We barely know each other, she pointed out. Then let's change that, I countered. Let me be the uncle I should have been all along. Let me be part of your lives, yours and Emma's. Lily studied me over the rim of her mug, her eyes, so like Beth's, cautious, but not unkind. Why? Why now, after all this time? I considered her question carefully. Because Emma reminded me of what matters. Because seeing Beth in both of you made me realize how much I've missed by cutting myself off from my past. Because I think Beth would want me to take care of her daughter and granddaughter. Lily's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You really knew nothing about me? All these years? I shook my head. Nothing. If I had known. I trailed off, not sure what I would have done, but certain it would have been different from the solitary life I had built. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of separation hanging between us. Then, from the other room, came Emma's voice. Can I come out now? I've been really quiet. A smile tugged at Lily's lips despite herself. Yes, you can come out. But we're not done talking about you running off on your own. Emma emerged, looking appropriately contrite for about 3 seconds before her expression brightened. Are you going to be our family now, Uncle Richard? The simple question, asked with a child's directness, cut through all the complications and hesitations. I looked at Lily, waiting for her lead. We'll see, she said, her tone gentler than before. We have a lot to talk about first. It wasn't a no. It was a beginning. The evening progressed in a surreal blur of conversation and connection. After Emma's bedtime, which she protested until Lily promised she could see me again soon, Lily brought out a worn shoebox filled with the fragments of her search for identity. We sat on her small couch, the box between us like a bridge spanning decades of separation. These are all the pieces I've managed to find, she explained, carefully removing a small stack of photos. My birth certificate. A few newspaper clippings about Beth, mostly her obituary, and a piece about the accident. Some photos I got from a high school friend of hers who found me on Facebook a few years ago. I picked up the obituary with trembling hands. There was Beth's school picture, her smile frozen in time, her eyes, Emma's eyes, looking out at a future she would never see. The stark headline read, "Local teen dies in tragic accident." There was no mention of her pregnancy, of course. That would have been scandalous in our community back then. "Do you know who Emma's grandfather is?" I asked, the question that had been nagging at me since I realized the timeline of Beth's pregnancy. Beth's boyfriend. Lily nodded, removing another clipping. His name was Michael Donnelly. He was a senior when Beth was a junior. She handed me a yearbook photo showing a handsome young man with dark hair and a confident smile. He died in the same accident as Beth. They were in his car. The revelation hit me with unexpected force. I had known Beth wasn't alone in the accident. My parents had mentioned another victim, but I had never connected the dots. Perhaps because no one had wanted me. 2. They were going to run away together, Lily continued, her voice soft. According to Beth's friend Jenny, who gave me these photos, they had planned to go to his aunt's place in Vermont until after I was born. Then they were going to get married. I closed my eyes, memories flooding back. The hushed arguments between Beth and our parents. Beth packing a bag one night, only to unpack it when she saw me watching. The phone calls that ended abruptly when someone entered the room. My parents must have been furious, I murmured. They were so traditional, so concerned with appearances. A pregnant teenage daughter would have been their worst nightmare. Lily's expression was pensive. Jenny said Beth was determined to keep me. That's why they were running away. Your parents had arranged for Beth to stay with a sick aunt until I was born, then give me up for adoption. The pieces fell into place with painful clarity. My parents' rigid control, Beth's increasing rebellion, the tension that had filled our house in the months before her death. It all made sense now. They got their way in the end, I said bitterly. Just not how they planned. Lily touched my hand gently. Don't blame them too much, Richard. They were products of their time and their upbringing. And my adoptive parents were good people. They gave me a stable home, an education, love. I wasn't unhappy. Her forgiveness, her perspective, humbled me. This woman had every right to be angry at my parents, at fate, at me for my ignorance. Yet she spoke with a compassion that reminded me achingly of Beth. Still, I said, you deserve to know your biological family. I deserved to know my niece existed. Lily smiled sadly. We can't change the past. But we're here now, aren't we? As we neared the end of our conversation, I sensed that the truth was within our grasp. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more surreal than the last. Lily's serene demeanor was a constant reassurance as I began to piece together the fragments of her identity, gradually revealing a connection that defied conventional explanation. There's something else, Lily said, reaching deeper into the box. Something I've never shown anyone else. She pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age, and handed it to me. This was with my adoption papers. It was sealed until I turned 18. With a sense of reverence, I opened the envelope and removed a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was instantly familiar, Beth's distinctive, looping script that had once filled birthday cards and notes slipped under my door. My dearest baby, the letter began. I don't know if you'll ever read this or if you'll want to know about the mother who couldn't keep you. But I want you to know that giving you up is the hardest thing I've ever done. I want you to have a family that can give you everything you deserve, a mother and a father who are ready to be parents, a stable home, opportunities one can't provide at 16. Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. Beth wrote of her hopes for her unborn child, her dreams of what their life might be like. She mentioned Michael's excitement about becoming a father, his determination to make a life for their little family despite their youth. If you ever want to find me, the letter continued, I hope you will. But if not, please know that you were loved from the moment I knew you existed. You are a part of me and a part of Michael, and whatever happens, that will always be true. The letter was dated March 10th, 2 days before the accident. Beth had written it believing she was about to give her baby up for adoption, not knowing she would never hold her child. I handed the letter back to Lily, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I found it when I was 18, Lily said quietly. That's when I started looking for my biological family. I wanted to know the mother who had written those words. By then, of course, I knew she was gone. The moment of revelation arrived unexpectedly when I noticed a small, familiar object at the bottom of the box. My heart pounded in anticipation as I recognized a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny silver horse. "Where did you get this?" I asked, picking it up carefully. Lily frowned. "It was with my adoption papers. My birth mother's, I assume." "Why?" "I gave this to Beth," I whispered, memories washing over me. "For her 15th birthday. She loved horses, and our parents wouldn't let her take riding lessons because they thought it was too dangerous." I almost laughed at the irony. "So I saved my allowance for months and bought this instead." She promised she'd never take it off. Lily's eyes widened. And she didn't. She was wearing it when you were born, I finished. "Someone must have taken it off her wrist and made sure it stayed with you." "A nurse, maybe," Lily mused. "Or a kind doctor who thought I should have something of hers." The bracelet lay in my palm, a tangible link between past and present. Between Beth and her daughter. Between the boy I had been and the man I had become. "She would have loved you so much," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "And Emma too. She would have been so proud of the woman you've become, Lily." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Do you really think so?" "I know it," I assured her. "You have her compassion, her directness. And Emma has her spirit, her determination. Beth lives on in both of you." As I said the words, I realized their truth. Beth wasn't entirely gone. Her blood ran in Lily's veins, in Emma's. Her traits, her essence, had passed to the next generations even though she hadn't lived to see them grow. In that poignant moment, the little girl with Beth's eyes and her mother with Beth's kindness seemed like a deliberate message from the fabric of my own history. The familiarity in their features was a mirror reflecting the family I had lost, and I finally understood that their presence in my life was not an accident, but a gift. A second chance to honor Beth's memory by caring for the daughter and granddaughter she never knew. "Will you tell me about her?" Lily asked, her voice small. "Not just the facts I've pieced together, but the real Beth. What she was like as a sister, as a person. The things only someone who loved her would know." And so I did. As the night deepened around Lily's small apartment, I shared stories of Beth that I hadn't allowed myself to remember in decades. Beth teaching me to climb the apple tree in our backyard. Beth defending me against neighborhood bullies. Beth sneaking me cookies when I was supposed to be in bed. Beth with her nose in a book, so absorbed she didn't hear Mother calling for dinner. With each memory shared, each laugh or moment of recognition. From Lily, I felt something shift inside me, a burden lifting, a wound beginning to heal. For 25 years, I had tried to outrun the pain of losing Beth by building walls around my heart and filling my life with achievements instead of connections. But sitting here with her daughter, I realized how futile that effort had been. The only way past the pain was through it, and the path led directly to the family I never knew I had. As midnight approached, Lily yawned, reminding me of how long we'd been talking and how much she had been through recently with her surgery and recovery. "I should go," I said reluctantly, not wanting to leave this newfound connection, but aware of her fatigue. "But I'd like to come back. To get to know you both better, if you'll let me." Lily studied me, her expression thoughtful. "I think I'd like that," she said finally. "And Emma would love it. She's already decided you're her uncle." I smiled, warmed by the thought of the precocious child who had changed my life in a single afternoon. "She's remarkable. You've raised her well." "Thank you," Lily said simply. As we stood, I hesitated, then asked the question that had been on my mind since learning of her financial struggles. "Lily, please let me help with your medical bills. As your uncle, as family. Not charity, just family helping family." She stiffened slightly, pride warring with practicality in her expression. "I've always managed on my own." "I know," I said quickly. "And you could keep doing so. But you don't have to. Not anymore." After a long moment, Lily nodded. For Emma's sake, she conceded. "I can't risk losing our home, not when she's already settled in school here." It was a start. I would take it. When I left Lily's apartment that night, the world seemed different, sharper, more vivid, as if I'd been living in a fog that had suddenly lifted. The drive back to my penthouse in Back Bay felt like traveling between worlds. The gleaming high-rises and exclusive shops of my neighborhood were just miles from Lily's modest apartment, but they might as well have been on different planets. As I rode the private elevator to my top-floor apartment, I was acutely aware of the emptiness that awaited me. The space I'd once considered the perfect bachelor retreat, minimalist, elegant, impersonal, now felt hollow. There were no children's drawings on my refrigerator, no well-worn books filling the shelves, no signs of life beyond my own carefully curated existence. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk until dawn, making plans, researching options, considering possibilities that had never before entered my mind. By the time the sun rose over Boston Harbor, casting golden light across my spotless hardwood floors, I had made more decisions than in any board meeting. The next day was a whirlwind. I called Sarah, my assistant, and cleared my schedule for the week, something I hadn't done in the 15 years she'd worked for me. Her stunned silence spoke volumes about how out of character this was. "Is everything all right, Mr. Westfield?" she finally asked, concern evident in her voice. "Better than all right, Sarah," I replied, surprising myself with the lightness in my tone. "I've had a family situation arise. A good one." After handling the most pressing business matters via phone, I made my way to Brookline. I had texted Lily to make sure it was okay to visit, and she'd responded with a simple, "Emma would be disappointed if you didn't." When I arrived at their apartment building, I was carrying several bags, not gifts exactly, but necessities. I had stopped at a pharmacy to pick up medications Lily had mentioned during our conversation, making sure to get the name-brand versions her insurance wouldn't cover. I had also brought groceries, having noted the sparse contents of her refrigerator the night before. Emma opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been watching for me. "Uncle Richard," she exclaimed, launching herself at me with the unself-conscious affection only children can manage. "Mom said you might come today." I balanced the bags and returned her hug, surprised by how natural it felt. "Hello, Emma. Is your mother home?" "She's resting," Emma said, lowering her voice to what she probably thought was a whisper, but was more of a stage murmur. "The doctor said she needs to take it easy, but she was up all night grading papers." Lily appeared in the hallway behind her daughter, looking tired but smiling. "Not all night, just later than I should have," she corrected gently. "Hello, Richard. Come in." The final leg of our journey was filled with a bittersweet acceptance of what the past had to offer and a hopeful anticipation of the future. I helped Emma put away the groceries while Lily watched from the kitchen table, insisting she felt fine, but clearly grateful for the assistance. "You didn't have to do this," she said as I stored a carton of milk in the refrigerator. "I wanted to," I replied simply. "Besides, Emma tells me you make excellent pancakes, and I noticed you were out of chocolate chips." Emma beamed. "Can we make pancakes for lunch, Mom? Please?" Lily laughed, the sound brightening the small kitchen. "It's hardly a nutritious lunch." "I'll add blueberries to mine," Emma negotiated. "That's fruit." "Fruit is healthy." I watched their easy back and forth with a mixture of joy and wistfulness. This was what family looked like, this comfortable dance of negotiation and affection, of boundaries gently tested and reinforced. It was what I had missed all these years without realizing it. "I've been thinking," I said once the groceries were put away and Emma was occupied drawing at the coffee table. "About what happens next." Lily raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." I smiled to reassure her. "Not at all. I want to be part of your lives. Both of you. Not just financially, though I'm certainly willing to help there too, but really involved. If you'll let me." "What does that look like to you?" Lily asked, direct as always. "For starters, I'd like to see you regularly. Sunday dinners, perhaps. I could take Emma to the Children's Museum or the aquarium. I could help with her homework, though I'm terrible at art, fair warning." I hesitated, then added, "And I'd like to set up a college fund for her. And cover your medical expenses, no arguments." Lily started to protest, but I held up a hand. "Beth would want me to," I said softly. "She would want her daughter and granddaughter taken care of." "Let me do this, Lily. Not because you need it, but because it's what family does." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Sunday dinners would be nice, she conceded. And Emma would love the aquarium. But we need to take the rest slowly. I'm not comfortable with Mom. Emma interrupted, rushing over with a drawing. Look what I made. It's us. She proudly displayed a crayon masterpiece showing 3 stick figures, a small one with yellow pigtails, a medium one with brown hair, and a tall one in what appeared to be a suit. That's you, she told me, pointing to the tall figure. I gave you a briefcase because you're a businessman. I knelt down to admire the artwork, genuinely touched by my inclusion in her family portrait. It's wonderful, Emma. Do you think I could have it for my office? Emma's eyes widened. Really? You want my drawing? Absolutely, I assured her. It would be the first personal touch in a very businesslike space. Emma handed it over with pride, then frowned thoughtfully. Where do you live, Uncle Richard? Do you have a house like ours? I have an apartment, I explained. But it's in a different neighborhood in Back Bay. Is it big? Emma asked, her natural curiosity taking over. Too big for one person, I admitted. And not nearly as cozy as your home. Emma considered this. Maybe you could live closer to us, she suggested with a child's simplicity. Then you could come over all the time, and we could have pancakes together. Lily laughed softly. Emma, Uncle Richard has his own life. He can't just move because you want pancake breakfasts. But Emma's innocent question had planted a seed in my mind. My penthouse was just a place to sleep, not a home. It held no memories, no joy, no purpose beyond displaying my wealth and status. The apartment where I stood, with its worn furniture and crayon drawings, felt more like home after 2 visits than my penthouse had in a decade. Actually, I said slowly, that's not a bad idea. Lily looked alarmed. Richard, you don't have to, not into your building, I clarified quickly. But Brookline is a lovely neighborhood. There are some beautiful brownstones not far from here. I've always preferred them to high-rises, if I'm honest. I just chose my current place because it seemed appropriate for someone in my position. A brownstone would have stairs, Emma pointed out seriously. Mom can't do stairs yet because of her operation. I had to smile at her practical concern. That's true. But maybe by the time I found a place and moved in, your mom would be feeling better. This is crazy, Lily protested, but there was a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. You're not going to uproot your life based on a 5-year-old's suggestion. Why not? I countered. Emma's suggestion yesterday led me to you, and that's the best thing that's happened to me in decades. Entering the familiar home, I was welcomed by echoes of laughter and the warmth of bygone days. The reunion that ensued was not just between a lost uncle and his newfound family. It was a reconciliation of the fragmented parts of my soul. In those tender moments, I embraced the notion that sometimes life forces us to confront our deepest truths in the most unexpected ways. The presence of Emma and Lily had unlocked a part of my heart that I thought was long sealed, and I began to understand the healing power of facing one's past. The 3 of us spent the afternoon together, making pancakes that were more chocolate chip than batter, despite Lily's half-hearted objections, playing board games that Emma insisted on teaching me, and talking, really talking, in a way I hadn't done with anyone in years. Lily shared stories of her childhood with her adoptive parents, good people who had given her a stable home, but never quite filled the void left by her unknown origins. I told them about my college years, my early business ventures, skipping over the cutthroat details in favor of the more entertaining mishaps and lucky breaks. By the time evening fell and Emma was yawning despite her protests that she wasn't tired, I felt as if I'd known them both forever. The connection was immediate and undeniable. This was my family, the one I'd never known I was missing. I should go, I said reluctantly as Lily began Emma's bedtime routine. But I'll come back tomorrow, if that's all right. I have some legal paperwork I'd like to discuss, Lily, setting up that college fund for Emma and taking care of those medical bills. Lily looked like she might argue, but then she sighed. All right, but dinner is on me tomorrow. I make a mean lasagna. I smiled. I look forward to it. Emma insisted on a hug before I left, throwing her small arms around my neck with complete trust. Night, Uncle Richard. See you tomorrow. Good night, Emma, I replied, my voice rough with emotion. Sweet dreams. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone and opened my real estate app, something I hadn't done in years. Brookline, I typed into the search bar. Single-family homes. Leaving the house later that day, I felt lighter and more complete. The encounter had transformed my perspective on life, reminding me that even the most illustrious paths are paved with personal history and human vulnerability. With a renewed sense of purpose, I stepped forward into a future where I no longer feared the shadows of my past, but rather welcomed them as essential threads in the tapestry of my life. 2 months later, I stood in the empty living room of a Victorian brownstone just 3 blocks from Lily and Emma's apartment. Sunlight streamed through bay windows onto hardwood floors that needed refinishing. The kitchen was outdated, the bathrooms required modernizing, and the backyard was overgrown. It was, in every way, the opposite of my sleek, perfect penthouse. "It's perfect," I told the realtor, who looked surprised but quickly recovered. "It needs a lot of work, Mr. Westfield," she cautioned. "And it's smaller than what you initially specified." "It's just the right size," I assured her. "And the work will give me something to do on Saturdays when I'm not at the aquarium." She looked confused but didn't question further, a benefit of being known as an eccentric billionaire. That evening, I took Lily and Emma to dinner to share my news. Emma was ecstatic, immediately launching into plans for sleepovers and movie nights. Lily was more reserved, still cautious about the rapid changes in our lives, but I saw genuine happiness in her eyes. "Are you sure about this?" she asked when Emma had gone to look at the dessert menu. "It's a big change, Richard." "I've never been more sure of anything," I told her truthfully. "For 25 years, I've been running from my past, from loss, from the pain of losing Beth. But the thing is, Lily, I lost more than just Beth that day. I lost the chance to know you, to see Emma grow up. I don't want to miss another day." Lily's eyes glistened. "Beth would be happy, I think, to see us together like this." "Yes," I agreed, picturing my sister's smile, her eyes that now looked out at me from Emma's face. "I think she would." As I drove home that night, to my penthouse, for a few more weeks at least, I felt a sense of rightness that had eluded me for decades. My life had been split in two by Beth's death before, when I was just a boy with a family and a future spread wide open before me, and after, when I became determined to control every aspect of my existence to avoid ever feeling that kind of pain again. Now, because of a precocious 5-year-old with my sister's eyes and her mother's quiet strength, I had been given a third act. A chance to be the Uncle Beth would have wanted me to be, to know her daughter and granddaughter, to be part of a family again. Some might call it chance or coincidence that Emma had found me that day. But as I pictured Beth, forever 16 in my memory, I wondered if perhaps she had guided her granddaughter's search. One last gift from a sister who had always looked out for me, even when we were children. "Thank you, Beth," I whispered to the empty car, to the night, to whatever might be listening. "I'll take care of them. I promise." And for the first time in 25 years, I felt at peace.